Hello everyone, welcome again to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be teaching you how I made this low back flare jumpsuit. If this is something you're interested in, kindly stick around and watch this video till the end, and please do not forget to hit the subscribe button, like, comment and share. Let's get right into this tutorial. So to begin, I'm going to draft out my bodice using a neckline of 3 by 3 inches, and then I'm going to get my shoulder line, which is 16 inches divided by 2, 8 inches. So I'm going to put that down there and get my vertical measurements. Okay, so I'm going to put down my chest line, my bust line, my under bust line and my waistline. I'm going to repeat these measurements on the other side and connect all the points with a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to repeat my shoulder measurements on my chest line. So I'm going to put down 8 inches there on my shoulder line, and then to get my shoulder slope, I'm going to come down by 1 inch from my shoulder line, and I'm going to connect with a straight line to my chest line and also with a slant line back into my neckline. And after doing this, I'm going to label my lines. Now after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to get my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. So I'm just going to put down 4 inches on my waistline down to my bust line, and I'm going to connect with a straight line. So after doing that, I'm just going to get my dart intake. Now on the center front, I'm going to be taking out 1/2 inch from my under bust line, and then on the side front, I'll be using 1.5 inch. I'm going to extend this down to my waistline and I'll connect. Next, I'm just going to get my shoulder measurement, which is 2.5 inches. I'll be using 2.5 inches on the shoulder line, and then I'm going to connect this with a curve to create my armhole. So from my chest line, I'm going to come up by 2.5 inches, and I'm doing that because we're going to tighten the armhole. So from that point, I'm going to take out my armhole dart, and I'll be using 1.5 inches for my armhole tightening, and I'm just going to connect this to my bust line with a curve. Now after doing that, I'm just going to get the difference between each dart leg. So I have an excess of 1 inch, and I'm going to replace the excess and create my new armhole. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get my round measurement, and I'm going to replace the dart intake. And after doing all this, I'm going to connect all my points with a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get my bust dart. Now your bust dart is basically the difference between your front half length and your back half length. In my case, I have about 1.5 inches, and I'm going to connect this and cut out my pieces. So now I'll be drafting the back piece. So I'm going to get my neckline, which is 1.5 inches by 3 inches, and then my shoulder length, which is 8 inches, and then I'm going to come down from my shoulder length by 1 inch, and then I'm going to get my vertical measurement. So I'm going to put down my bust line and my waistline only, and then I'll repeat the same thing on the other side and connect these points with a straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is to get my waist dart. So I'm just going to pull down my nipple to nipple measurement, and then I'm going to get my dart. So I'll be using a dart of 1 inch, so ½ inch on both sides. From my chest line there, I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll create my waist dart. So the next thing I did was to get the round measurement for my bust and the round measurement for my waist, and I replaced the dart intake on the waistline, which is 1 inch, and also 1 inch for the zip tightening on the waistline. So I've taken 1 inch for the zip tightening. This ensures that your dress sits flat, and it also gives a snatched look at the back. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to cut out my back piece. So the next thing I did was to join both my front piece and my back piece shoulder to shoulder. So after doing this, I'm just going to place this front with the back side by side. And then from the waistline, I'm going to go up by 3.5 inches on the side, and then I'm going to take out 2.5 inches on the center back, and I'm going to connect this with a curve. I'm also going to blend it into the front piece. So just give it a very smooth blend from the armhole to the waistline. The next thing I'm going to do is to get the strap for the back piece. This dress has a strap at the back. Okay, so I'm going to repeat the same 2.5 inches I have on the shoulder line. I'm going to extend it all the way down to the waistline, just the way I'm doing it. And I'm going to cut out my pieces. So the next thing I'm going to do is to draft out my pants. For this, I'll be using 10 inches for my hip line and 12 inches for my crotch line. I'm going to repeat the same measurement on the other side and connect with a straight line. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to get my round hip measurement divided by 4. My round hip is 44 inches and divided by 4 is 11 inches. So I'm going to put that measurement on my hip line and my crotch line and also my waistline, and I'm going to connect it with a straight line to form a box. So on my waistline, I'm going to put down my waist circumference, which is your round waist divided by 4, and I'm going to connect that to the hip line. And for the front crotch extension, I'll be using 2.5 inches. Next, I'm going to put down the length of my pants. So for the length of this pants, I'll be using 16 inches, and I'm going to put this down and connect with a straight line. Now on the crotch line, I'm going to divide whatever value I get there by 2. I have about 13.5 inches on the crotch line, and that divided by 2 is 6.75. So I'm going to put that midpoint on my crotch line, my hemline, and also my waistline. On the center front of my pant, I'm just going to come down by 1/2 inch, and I'm going to connect that to the side front of the pant. And after doing all of this, I'm just going to cut out my front piece. So the next thing we're going to do is to work on the back pants. So I'm just going to place the front piece on another piece of paper and then come out from the crotch line by 2 inches, and then I'm going to also come down by 1/2 inch. And then from my waistline, I went up by 1.5 inches, and I came in as well by 1.5 inches, and then I connected with a slant line. So at this point, both the front and the back piece of our pant is ready. So I'm just labeling it, and then on the midpoint of the front piece, I'm going to give it a split. Now I'll get another piece of paper and I'm going to place my pieces on it. Now, depending on how full or how wide you want your pants to be, that's how you split this open, okay? So I'm just using about 7 inches for my split, and I'm just going to tape it down. So the next thing I'm going to do is to put my tape at my waistline and then just confirm that I have the same length of the pant at the split area. And I'm just going to connect it and cut it out. So I did the same thing for the back, and you can see we have both the front and the back ready. Next, I'll divide the pants again to create space for the pleats. And once I split it, that's where the pleats detail will go. So at this point, all our pattern pieces are ready, and I'm just going to go ahead to cut out all my pieces on the fabric. So for this particular outfit, I'll be using a Mikado fabric in 3 yards. I'm using Mikado fabric because of the structure. It's going to give me that flare effect that I want for this outfit. So when cutting your patterns, do not forget to include your seam allowance, okay? So I'm using 1 inch for the zipper allowance and then 1/2 inch all through. So for my back pants, as you can see, I'm going to be using 4 inches for my pleats because I don't want the back to be too full. And then I added my zipper allowance as well. And then for the front, I used 6 inches for the pleats. And also, do not forget to notch the part where your pleats is going to start from. Okay, just give it a notch the way I'm doing it, so you're not confused as to where your pleat is going to start from. And also, leave 1 inch on the hemline for your hemming allowance. So I have all my pieces ready. I cut out 4 pieces of each for the top part because the top part is going to have a lining and then the pants wouldn't have any lining. So I'm going to go ahead to join all my pieces with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So after notching, as you can see, I already pinned my shoulders together. So the strap part, I attached it to the shoulders and I pinned it down, and I'm going to go over to my sewing machine and stitch it down. So I've gone ahead to join the pieces and I also notched the seams. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to turn my fabric to the right side. And after doing that, I'm going to give it a very good press. Next, I'll be working on the pants. I'll unpin my pattern papers from the fabric, pin the pleats in place, and then join the crotch with 1/2 inch. So I've done that and this is what it's looking like. Now the pleats area, I'm going to press it to give it a very smooth finish. And then I'm going to place my front pants and the back right sides facing, and then I'm going to join the crotch with 1/2 inch. So this is what the pants look like after pressing. The next thing I'm going to do is to join my bodice to the pants, okay? Now before I do that, I'm going to get the midpoint of my bodice and I'm going to pin it to the pants. So I've pinned it down, and before I attach the bodice to the pants, I'll loosen about 2.5 inches at the waistline to insert the strap. Just watch closely to see how I do it. So this is how the jumpsuit is looking. I've attached my strap, and the next thing I'm going to do is to attach my zipper. So now our zipper is done. The next thing I did was to go ahead and hem the bottom. Okay, so I serged it and I turned it with 1 inch using my hemming gum. And then I didn't want to initially add pockets to this, but I changed my mind. I felt like pockets would look very nice on this type of outfit, so I added my pockets, and this is what it looks like. And also I had to add that on the side because when I wore it I noticed a little bit of gaping on the bust area, so I had to take about ½ inch of bust darts on the bust. And that's it for this tutorial. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give this a thumbs up, subscribe and support the channel so I can keep bringing you more sewing tutorials, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.